Everybody. Welcome back. We're back with the later half of the later part of session 4 of the Eugene Review Panel. We're going to hear from a speaker. This is the first speaker who was called by the panel. And I'm going to turn it over to Alex.
Yeah, thanks, Lynn. So I am going to introduce our one and only speaker for tonight, who again is the first person who you all have called. So that's very exciting. Very briefly here, so Michael Anderson is a senior researcher at the Sightline Institute. Michael writes about housing and transportation policy as a senior researcher for Sightline Institute, a sustainability think tank for the Pacific Northwest. He previously covered those subjects during 10 years as a newspaper, magazine, and web journalist in Oregon and Washington. So Michael will give you 10 minutes here. I'll give you a warning to kind of wrap things up when we've reached the 10-minute mark, and then we'll have time for questions.
Great, thank you. Pardon me, thank you so much. It's great to be here. Thanks for the invitation. Just a sec, let me go through the screen share rigmarole. All right, can you see me? Can you hear me? Everything's good? Thank you. Thanks so much for the invitation again. Great to be here. I am going to talk a little bit about history, a little bit about the things that we have done in Portland, that it's where I live, to address some similar issues that you're dealing with here in Eugene. And I am inevitably not going to know as much about Eugene as I do about Portland. I'm trusting you. Obviously, they are different cities. I'm trusting you to some extent to be able to translate some of these ideas from one city to another. You'll know better than I will which things translate, which do not, but I hope that some of it will inform the conversation here.
Michael, can I ask you to play your slideshow? I know some folks have trouble with the smaller text.
Oh, yes, of course.
Thank you.
So when I play the slideshow,
by going to view and then play, probably.
Of course. Yeah. No, I'll be moving through it. Yes, I think.
Okay, just if there's any way to get it to full screen mode, that would be great. If not,
full screen mode. Okay, sorry.
You can go to present in the upper right and it'll get there.
Yes, thank you.
Is that something that I can do? I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're doing it from your screen up there in the upper right where it says share, and then right next to that, present.
I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Well, we can do it from here. That's
yeah.
The slideshow will be on the panelist resources page. If it might already be there. Not sure. So carry on. Sorry.
All right. So I apologize.
No, that's okay. You just go for it. We'll make sure that anyone who has trouble seeing it has access to it on our resources page.
Okay. Well, yeah, I think it's important that somebody be able to see a full screen while they're watching. So if I need to do something, just tell me what I need to do. I'm sorry, I'm misunderstanding the need.
Oh, that's okay. It's just within your internet browser at the top right-hand corner where it says present there. But I would say just take your time to do the presentation.
Okay. Thanks. I apologize. So I'll talk a little bit about myself, who Sightline is. I'm a policy writer, researcher. I focus on housing and transportation. And Sightline Institute is a regional sustainability think tank. We have a central conviction that cities are good. We think that sustainability and environmentalism require cities, and cities require sustainability to remain prosperous. We focus specifically on Cascadia. You can see this map. The first time I saw this map, I think my boss got a laugh out of it. He was presenting in suburban Portland, and I think specifically he got a laugh because there was a feeling that we had gerrymandered Eugene into our domain, that was cheating.
Sorry, let me just interrupt there because there was a useful note in the chat here. They think you're using two screens, and the screen that's displaying is not the screen that you're looking at. So we're not seeing any map. We're just seeing the presentation in your browser and all of your other browser tabs.
All right. Thank you. I'm going to
redo the screen share.
Redo the screen share. Exactly. I'm going to stop the share. I'm going to start the share. Is that better?
That's perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm so sorry about that.
No problem.
Thanks a lot, everybody. So this is our regional focus in Cascadia. I focus specifically on Portland, but we are aspiring to write about the needs of our ecosystem and hopefully help it remain a model to the world of a place that has some of the richest natural resources and some of the countries that have the greatest economic resources, and prove that if we can do it here, it can be done elsewhere. So to that end, my work is focused heavily on zoning reform, which I think of as re-legalizing cities. This downtown Eugene building is illegal almost everywhere in the United States. I think that's silly. I can talk about more about why later, but it's not a problem that's unique to Eugene. It's large cities that you have heard of have the exact same issue. And the residential side of this, it manifests in the sort of neighborhood residential side in a few different kinds of buildings, missing middle housing, which you've all been tasked with learning about, thinking about here in Eugene. This looks like many streets in many cities. The one thing that's a little unusual about this building that this woman's walking past is the number of mailboxes. You can see there are 3, because that's a triplex. You may have seen these in some of the Eugene literature. I just pulled them out of the Missing Middle Handbook, but these are homes here in Eugene, duplexes that you might see on the street there, 4plex and of a couple different styles in Eugene. It's not unique to Eugene. Here's a duplex in Albany, all the way back from 1870, and there's an ADU in the back of this one, actually. So it's 3 units in this lot. Here's a triplex in Portland. Here's a 4plex in Portland. This is in my neighborhood. And Shorewood, Wisconsin, Omaha, Nebraska, sort of a clustered apartments. These are everywhere, and they're not unusual. They're not particularly specific to city size. These are a bunch of Oregon cities. You can see right in the middle of the list, there's Eugene, and it has exactly the same proportion of its homes in 2 to 4plexes. That is about 10%, as Portland, Albany, K Falls, Gresham, a little more than Bend, a little less than St. Helens. So middle housing is common in cities of every size. This is the case outside of Oregon as well. I just took a smattering of cities around the country to get a sense of the percentage of homes in American cities today that are in 2 to 4plexes. These are not the majority of homes by far, but they're certainly very common. What's unusual about these homes is that they are not everywhere, and they are also not being built in nearly the numbers that they used to be. So you can see this is just focusing specifically on Portland. The number of 4plexes built really peaked in the mid-century and has declined sharply and is almost nothing through the early part of the 21st century. So the question is, why is this? Why did this happen? And what can we do about it, if anything, in this time when many people are looking for homes they can afford? These are, by definition, going to be smaller homes, and they can make smaller homes economical in new ways. So they may be new and therefore more expensive than old homes, but they will be cheaper than other newly built homes. It's something that you'd think that would sort of naturally arise. The question is, what's going on here? What's going wrong? Why is capitalism not fixing this problem, right? This is a map. I'll focus to answer this question, I'm going to focus a little bit on Portland specifically. These are all of the 2 to 8plexes, I believe, in Portland today mapped. And you can see that not everywhere in Portland has such a heavy distribution of them. So this is a key to starting to understand what happened in Portland that made them not happen everywhere. you can see these zones in Portland, and the history of it is that back in 1924, from 1924 to 1950 or so, these are the first zones that ever banned attached housing, that banned duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes. And if you know Portland very well, you'll recognize these as the fancy neighborhoods. So the neighborhoods where either there was already exclusivity or there was an aspiration to become more exclusive. One of the things that neighborhood associations did was they said, okay, we were going to require that to live in this neighborhood, you not only have to purchase a home in this neighborhood, you also have to purchase a certain minimum amount of land in this neighborhood. This wasn't thought of as an exclusionary tactic. I think that it was thought of as a way to guarantee that everybody in this neighborhood has backyards and that there's lots of trees and lots of room to for people to enjoy things. Over time, I think that the unintended consequences of that became clearer. Over time, it was also expanded to cover almost the entire city. This is a map of where today in Portland, you are not allowed to build anything except a single detached home on almost any lot. So this model that was pioneered in the fancy neighborhoods was they were expanded to other neighborhoods, perhaps as they aspired to becoming fancier. And this is a similar story in Eugene. I don't know the specific history, but this is a map of Eugene zoning. I'm sure you've seen before, the sort of pale yellow indicating the same low density areas where attached housing is illegal today. In Portland, as we started thinking about why this was, what effects it was having, some things we noticed were that the one thing that you could do on all these lots, and was increasingly happening, was replace one house with one house. And of course, the large new house was going to be a larger house because that was the sort of natural economic consequence of replacing one house with one house as the only way to create new value, enough value to pay for the demolition of the existing house was to create a larger one. This is the largest home that was theoretically allowed by Portland zoning. I think in Eugene, it would be somewhat similar. This is about 6,700 square feet. In Eugene, it would be somewhere like 6,500 for a standard 5,200 square foot lot in the R1 zone. And it was not just theoretical. We were actually seeing this happening. I don't know if you have seen very many of these examples in Eugene, but perhaps to a lesser scale. Here's one particularly telling example. This is a $379,000 house in 2016, replaced the next year with a $923,000 oneplex on the same lot. It's just so like thinking about like $600,000. This is a very nice house. I don't begrudge anyone the right to live in this house if they have a desire to and the resources to. But just thinking about like $600,000, all of the things we could do with that money, all the better uses that could be put into real estate investment. It might be a different thing, in my opinion, if these huge houses that were being built were being filled with people, but that's not the case either. This is a nationwide statistic, as the size of new homes has gone up, as capitalism's waters have been channeled regulatorily into the only thing you're allowed to do on these homes, and that is to build a larger and larger single detached home. The family size has actually declined. Some of that is people having fewer children. A lot of it is people living longer, so it's good. But the number of people in the average home has dropped, and you can see the pale and dark blue lines in this chart rising. That's the number of square feet per person per house. Again, it's nice if you can afford it, but not everyone can. And the consequence of this gradual replacement of small homes with giant homes is that in the most expensive neighborhoods, fewer and fewer people can choose to live in the neighborhood at all. So what's the solution to that? In Portland, we've talked about various things and came up with a concept. First, we should shrink the maximum size of a newly built home regulatorily. And in addition, we should change the number of things you can do within the space you're allowed to use. So in addition to shrinking that larger home to a smaller footprint and a smaller total size, we said, well, and you can also put in more than one kitchen. So this is an example of a triplex setup in a similar building envelope to a new structure. It happens to have 3 kitchens in it. Each of those units will be smaller, suitable for smaller households if they so choose to live there. It'll be much cheaper, by far the cheapest new construction in this neighborhood because of that smaller size and because you can split the cost of the lot 3 ways.
You were at 10 minutes, so if you could wrap up, that would be great.
Yeah, I'll move along. This is the residential infill project summarized. I'll send you a link to that at the end of the presentation. You can look at this graphic in more detail, but the gist is we legalized 2, 3, and 4 plexes on all lots. And then I want to get very briefly into the deeper affordability amendment. In the bottom center of this, you can see that we also legalized 4 and 6 plexes with an affordability requirement. The reason for that is that if this is the amount of money, this orange bar is the amount of money it takes to subsidize a 1-plex into affordability, the amount of money it takes to subsidize a 4-plex into affordability, and a 6-plex. As you divide the lot among more units, it becomes cheaper and cheaper to move lots, to create homes that are regulated affordable homes. You can do more homes with the same amount of money. It comes into the range that a Habitat or some other nonprofit can actually start to produce these in any neighborhood it wants to. And that's what's now possible in Portland, or what will soon be possible once this residential infill project takes effect, is that on any lot in Portland, you can produce this below market housing, you can produce the market rate, lower cost housing. And I've got a few more slides to share, but I'll pause it there and see if I can answer any questions so far.
Okay, that sounds great. So as always, everybody raise your hand and we'll call on you. And at this point, just any information at all that you think would be useful to clarify or hear from Michael. All right, let's go to Chea.
I got a question. Is it as the number of like kitchens room increases, the cost of building the house or building the duplex goes down? And how is that so? I would think building a duplex or a triplex would be more expensive than building a one house unit, one family unit. But you're saying that it actually goes down with the number of housing, like number of plexes. How is that possible?
Yeah, that makes total sense. So the basically it's completely correct that the cost of the building 3 kitchens is more than the cost of building 1 kitchen. It's just you divide it 3 ways, right? So it may cost $450,000 to have a triplex, but each of those units only costs $150,000 each, because you're dividing not only the cost of the construction, but also the cost of the land. The cost of the land is something like 20 to 25% of the cost of the building, perhaps, and that can be completely split 3 ways. So can the sort of fixed costs of starting a project, hiring an architect, that sort of stuff. Meanwhile, the variable costs, that's the things that get more complicated, get higher when you have more units. Those things, each household pays for themselves as before. Does that make sense?
So it's not like a single landlord or a single person buying a lot, making a triplex. It's 3 people doing it. And
yeah, or I mean,
costs.
and that may take the form of a landlord purchasing it and sharing it with 2 other households, but they're essentially splitting the cost with those 2 other households, right? The landlord couldn't do it without the rent from those 2 households. So, yeah, one way or another, it's being split.
Okay.
Great, we'll go to Will next.
Hi, Michael. I had a question for you about the slide you had on public subsidies required to buy a home. I know very little, if anything, about real estate, and I was just wondering, like, is that a public subsidy that goes to developers from the federal government, or like what were you referring to with that?
Yeah, well, it's a public subsidy that doesn't currently exist because we've designed our subsidy programs around larger multi-unit structures for the most part. The exception is small nonprofits like Habitat, or in Portland, there are various community development corporations, Hacienda, Reach, and so on. I'm not sure what are active in Eugene, but the for the most part, the larger share of federal and other subsidies are going to larger multi-family apartment buildings. An increasingly popular sort of model in the affordable housing sector, I would say, is to try to scatter smaller size buildings throughout the city so that different people get to live next to different kinds of people all the time. You get to live next to a job, you get to live next to a school, whatever your income is, right? So one thing that excites me about middle housing in the context of like regulated affordable housing is that it creates an opportunity to open every neighborhood to subsidies, even without it needing to be a neighborhood that has like, a 5-story apartment building in it, if that makes sense. Does that answer the question? I'm not sure I got back to it.
Yeah, I think so. You kind of touched on something right at the end there that I had like a little bit of a follow-up for.
Please.
So bringing middle housing into neighborhoods could also bring more or like more potential for subsidized housing in different areas. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, for sure. Because like essentially like all of those areas in yellow on my map are no-go zones for affordable housing until they allow anything larger, not larger, but even anything cheaper than a single detached home. A single detached home is the most expensive housing type to build, and therefore requires the most subsidy to subsidize down to the level where a low-income person can afford it. So to the extent that this is being used for subsidized housing, it can be, you are opening up vast new areas of the city for the first time to give people the option to live there despite a low income, if you can create that housing through various nonprofits usually and start to operate in those neighborhoods.
Okay. So we have a hard cutoff in a few minutes here, but Aaron and Francisco can have the last word if we can make this a real lightning round of 2 more questions. That'd be great.
Cool, thanks. My question is that as population density increases in these neighborhoods, how do utilities and parking space handle the load?
I'd love to talk to you about parking at greater length. I'm obsessed with parking. But on the utility side, the answer is pretty simple. In almost every neighborhood, population has declined because of that declining family size. And so the number of people flushing the toilet, the number of people turning on a light, taking a bath has gone down. The utilities are not going to be strained in almost any sort of urban infill neighborhood that has any historic background to it. In terms of greenfields, like new development on the fringe, then that has to be built into the calculations, and a developer has every incentive to make sure the toilets don't back up, as well as the regulatory requirements. So there's a sort of 2 different situations and 2 different answers.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. On parking, it is one of the things you'll note from that picture of the Portland that I shared of the theoretical things is almost none of these homes are possible if you require more than a couple parking spaces on a lot. The fact of it is that you are choosing between whether parking or housing is more important to the future of your city. 25% of Eugene tenants live with no car even now, not to mention the number of people who have 1 car, share a car, park in the street, etc. Ultimately, if you're going to make a welcoming city that can evolve into less of a need for automobiles, you need to prioritize space and homes in walkable, bikeable, transit-friendly areas. Otherwise, it's just going to be more cars coming in from further out.
Word.
All right. Real quick here to wrap us up, Francisco.
Yeah, really quickly. When you're talking about affordability requirements, who will be the organization who will set those caps of how much a new unit is going to cost?
That would be the city of Eugene or anyone else that cares to sort of write the checks for the subsidy, I suppose. And again, this is something that's only possible if the city of Eugene allows the zoning to permit these lower cost housing types. So it's not until you get to the 6-plex that Portland was able to make the price comparable to the subsidy required for an apartment building. So essentially, you're not going to get like regulated affordability in a 4-plex. It's just not enough. You're not splitting the land cost enough different ways. You need to get to the higher size in the 6-plex to do that. So that's the catch.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael. And we appreciate you being here. And I'm going to pass it back over to Lynn.
Thanks, especially the lightning round there at the end. Appreciate it. Everybody, we're going to be moving off the live stream here for the